So that brings us to another topic. One of the big later topics was just, people that are around 10 years ago will know that there was a lot of kind of like hoopla, especially in the New Age community, about this idea that like the Mayan calendar was ending in 2012 and that indicated somehow the end of the world or something like that. And while it was clear to many of us around the astrological community at that time that this was being hyped up and was being sort of distorted in some weird ways for odd purposes, I wanted to talk to you and ask like what happened there and what was the actual story.
Okay. What actually happened was it was very early in the 20th century that scholars figured out how to count the long count. And within that long cycle of 5,125 years, beginning on August the 11th, 3114 BC, and ending on December 21st, 2012, they had figured out that it seemed to end in 2012, and there was nothing forthcoming on anything new, anything different, anything beyond this. So they assumed that the Maya were predicting the end of time or the end of the world, and this really demonstrates nothing more than the fact that even early archaeologists, scientists though they may have been, were still very much under the influence of the Abrahamic religions, which do believe in an apocalypse, a final end of the world, and that they did not understand that the Maya thought in the same manner as Hindus with their yugas, pralayas, interlocking cycles of thousands or even millions of years. They simply did not understand that the Maya thought the same way. And it wasn't really until, oh my gosh, probably not until the 1990s that we were able to translate what's called the Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque. And I've mentioned this earlier, that it predicts that the king Pakal the Great will return on a certain date in the year 4772 AD or CE, and reincarnate and become the king of Palenque again. So it should have been clear that the Maya were thinking far beyond 2012. But sometimes the New Age fails to realize that because they were also, most of them, born and raised in American or European families that also come from the Abrahamic tradition, that they're just kind of hardwired for this end of the world stuff. So people began to interpret it as such. We now know that the Maya were simply talking about a world age, one of which begins at 3114 BC and ended in 2012. And the next one that began in 2012 will go for another 5,125 years and be divided into 13 cycles, which are divided into groups of 20-year cycles. And that this was just their way of counting and also of predicting historical patterns, which is something I'd like to write about at some point. I have written a little bit about it, but that book is only available in a PDF. I haven't managed to get it into solid print yet.
What book is that titled?
The Mayan Prophecies.
Okay, so that's the one
where I analyze all 13 groups of 20-year cycles in the Chalam Balam books.
Okay, so that's the one that's available as a PDF on your website if people just email you.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So yeah, and then the 2012 stuff, it seemed like that was something that really picked up in like the 1990s forward, basically, and then it got merged with other, like they tried merging sometimes with other ideas from Western astrology, like with the Age of Aquarius, other stuff like that, and it just seemed like
Right. Instead of end of the world, it became enlightenment for everybody. In some, or for some thinkers.
sure, but it was very much disconnected from
Mhm.
not just what the ancient actual like Mayan astrology would have said or implied about that, but also even it seemed like contemporary practitioners of Mesoamerican astrology weren't really even being consulted that much either, it seemed like, right?
Um, they were not aware of it because the Maya stopped using the long count around 900 CE, and only the 20-year fragments survived, not the entire picture of the long count. And those 20-year cycles found their way into the books of Chalam Balam and survived that way, but somewhat out of context in the larger scheme of things. So, yeah, it was basically just a whole series of misunderstandings, really.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So I think that brings
I
us.
was going to say, right, when I first got, because they did not remember the long count, even in Momostenango, where more of the ancient tradition survives than any other place, most of the people there had never heard of 2012 until hippie visitors started coming up on the chicken bus and asking them about it.
Oh no. Uh, that must have
Seriously.
been really, really awkward. That's an awkward.
It must have been. Most of them were aware of this, what they call this crazy Western idea, by the time I got there in 2010. And my good friend Don Rigoberto had already, made a living for himself going around to various different countries explaining the real concept.
Okay.
He
So is
he was a very fine historian of Mayan culture, and he did understand the long count.
is that part of the reason why, because you said your first book that you wrote, Jaguar Wisdom, which I believe came out in 1997, that became
97. Yeah.
97, that became like popular. It became unexpectedly popular at some later date. Was it partially due to that or swept up in some of that hype, or how did that come about?
Well, I was trying to. I also spoke of it as change in larger cycles of time. My intention was to take the focus off of all this stuff about sunspots and alien astronauts and end of the world or enlightenment for everybody, and return things to a consideration of the actual Mayan people and what they had retained of their ancient knowledge. So, of course, my whole treatment of the 2012 phenomenon was fairly skeptical.
Sure, sure.
But
I,
because the Mayan, because the long count has its roots in the 260-day calendar. The book probably did become popular because people were looking at it in hopes of finding out more about 2012. If so, Well, I would have suspected that they might be disappointed, but apparently a lot of people really took to the ideas in it because it became very popular. So I feel like my intention sort of worked out in the sense that I did manage to turn the focus back to the living Maya and what they remember instead of alien astronauts and what have you. Yeah.